to work with, Rascal Flatts and sort of being involved with that from the get-go. Carrie, Reba, Bryan is still one of my dearest friends. I met him before he ever had a record deal. I could go on, but that good fortune of being able to say, yeah, let's work together, and what comes out of their heart, what comes out of their mouth as they sing is like the best in the world. And to be able to constantly be around that is it's almost unexplainable. So I feel very blessed about that. I'm Mark Bright, and this is Famous with Jacy Valeras.
Mark Bright, thank you so much for joining me today. What an honor it is to have the chance to sit next to you.
Thank you. It's my absolute pleasure to be here.
Grammy winner, platinum selling, producer, musician, songwriter, publisher. When people say your name in Nashville, I feel like everyone turns their head to look. And it's because you've worked with some of the biggest names in music. Carrie Underwood, Reba McEntire, Rascal Flatts, Bryan, Brad Paisley, Keith Urban. I could be here all day just naming these names. But your career didn't start there. Your career started when you were a child back in Texas. So take me back to your childhood and paint me a picture of what your hometown was like and what it was like growing up.
I'm from a little town in East Texas, not far away from Tyler, Texas. My hometown is called Longview, Texas, and really, it all began with my sister buying a phonograph record player, and she started buying records and albums.
Okay.
And the rule was that I wasn't allowed to go into my big sister's room for anything, much less listen to music. So when she started dating boys, I would sneak in there, and I started noticing this band called the Beatles. It's like, wow, they look sort of like they didn't do what their parents told them to do. So started listening to that, and I was immediately just transformed. And I remember the first single I heard was, I guess it was a B-side called Hey Jude. Mm-hmm. And just, it just was like, I can't believe there's music this good that's available to people.
Really, yeah.
And yeah.
And so you were hooked then and there.
Hooked. I didn't picture myself as an artist. I was never interested in that. But I wanted to play anything I could get my hands on. But more importantly to me, I can completely remember seeing this name on the back of that Beatles album, a guy named George Martin. And I did some reading, as much reading as you could do what was available back in the 60s, what a record producer was, and I decided, well, he gets to tell the Beatles what to do in the studio. I want to be that guy.
Right.
I want to be George Martin.
For sure, absolutely. So when you started forming these dreams, did you have an early encourager? Was someone there to believe in you and say, you know what, I think you could actually do this?
Oh, I think my mom and dad were like, like crazy child. Let him, if he likes music, let him do that. For Christmas, they bought me a Silvertone acoustic guitar, which I still have to this day.
Really?
Yeah, but I didn't know how to tune it, and really wasn't interested in lessons. So I just figured out how to make some type of tuning on the guitar, and it turned out many years later, I figured out that I had made what's called a slack key tuning, but I could play a couple of notes up the neck with the guitar, and that was completely sufficient for me.
Well, eventually you came to Nashville. What was it about Nashville that made you so interested in wanting to be in this city?
Well, I played in high school. I was in a band that was a sponsored band by the high school. It was called the Singsations. But I'd been in choir, and I'd been in band, and I was influenced by, I was a drummer in the band, in the marching band, and orchestra band. And I just moved up those ranks. So I gave up the guitar for a minute and was playing drums. And my first band director, whose name escapes me, but he was a beautiful man. He'd let us come in early to school and listen to his Maynard Ferguson records on his record player there in the band hall, and that just sort of was a big, huge encouragement to me. And I felt like, for some stupid reason, that I understood music better than all my classmates. I don't know why I felt that, but that's what I felt like. I wasn't better, but I just understood it more for some reason.
Yeah. Well, you came to Nashville. You attended Belmont University.
I did.
Was there a decision that you made early on in your career in those days that you think directly impacted the success you ended up having?
Yes, and I would say specifically it was the idea that, okay, number one, I've got to meet and build relationships. That was more important than anything. So some of the people that I met in school at Belmont, I still know to this day.
Really?
And one of those that was in my music theory class was Wayne Kirkpatrick, who just became a magnificently successful songwriter, and others. And I'm not saying or suggesting that we're still close friends, but we still, know each other and say hi when we see each other. And there were a few others, and so that kind of thing really stuck. But I also met a guy in one of my classes I was flunking named John Briggs, and John Briggs's brother David Briggs played in Elvis's band, and he also had a studio on 16th Avenue. And so John would take me over and show me the studio, and my eyes were just popping out of my head. And the studio, I think, still exists to this day.
Wow.
And John was working at Screen Gems Music. He was working in the tape room. As he was getting close to graduating, he was interviewing for a job to be a membership rep at ASCAP. And he worked it out to where I could have his tape room job at Screen Gems. He kind of smoothed the way for me, and the big boss there, Charlie Feldman, hired me. And I can remember very well I was getting paid $12,000 a year, but I also had to work on their publishing demos at night for free. But I have never had a better time subsisting on peanut butter and crackers than ever.
I mean, you were living your dream,
Yes,
right? Already.
yes.
What were you doing? What were you doing in the tape room?
I was so back in those days, the tape room assistant, when a song plugger at the publishing company wanted to play a big shot like an A&R girl or man, or a record label, a song for an artist, they had reel players that had all the songs on them, and I would make cassette copies of those reel-to-reels for them to pitch to the A&R people or label heads. So that was my job, was making. And the great thing about that position, starting at the ground level, is you get to know that publishing company's catalog really well. And so I feel so blessed that that's what my entry point was.
And listening to that amount of music on a daily basis must have really influenced you as a songwriter, as a producer, hearing the different styles of things that were being written.
Certainly as a songwriter, I remember that originally the songwriters that were signed to Screen Gems I'm not naming all of them, but some of them were Wendy Waldman, Bill LaBounty, Craig Bickhart, and Becky Foster. These magnificent writers who had written just tremendous hits. They were incredible creatives, and they would make time for me. For whatever reason, they liked me or had sympathy for me and let me hang out with them, and it was just, I can't even describe how edifying that an experience that was.
Yeah. You eventually started working with Blackhawk.
I did.
I think that was your first producing role.
Actually, it was the first legit one. I had previously worked on with an artist named Henry Gross, who was the lead singer back in the '60s of a band called Sha Na Na. They actually played at Woodstock.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and we got to know each other, and I made an album with him in my basement, and it was released. It was called "I Keep on Rocking." It was released in Europe, and so that was my very first one. But he introduced me to a buddy of his named Henry Paul. And at the time I met Henry, I was moving into that spot at Screen Gems where I was no longer a tape guy, but I became a song plugger. I was the person that could actually play a song for an A&R person.
Yeah.
That was my own idea. And Henry and I became fast friends. I signed him to a publishing deal. And Henry had come out of a band called The Outlaws, which is a southern rock band that had, I think one of their hits was Green Grass and High Tides.
Yep.
And we became fast friends, and so we worked together, and ultimately that was the band that became Blackhawk, which was Dave Robbins, Henry Paul, and Van Stevenson, who passed away a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And we had just the best time recording that music.
It feels like that was really the thing that just kind of skyrocketed your career.
It was the
because
first thing.
Yeah, I feel like from that moment on, you just have not stopped. So from there to, obviously you worked with Carrie Underwood on her debut album. What was going on in between that time? Were you writing a lot? What were you doing?
Writing was something I wasn't doing. I kind of moved to town to be a writer-producer, but when I had the opportunity to work on demos for our writers, the writers would go, well, I like your ideas. I like where you're going with that. So the producing thing sort of took off. So unfortunately for me, I felt like I can't do all of this. I'm not smart enough to do all of this. So I put songwriting aside and really developed that one area where people seemed interested, which was producing.
Yeah. Who were some of your influences in the producing world? Did you have mentors that helped guide you?
For sure. When I moved to town, one of the first people I met was Paul Worley. And Paul, I still think to this day, is one of the greatest record producers, musicians that ever came to this town.
For sure. Absolutely.
And met him, and a lot of other producers, but Paul was certainly, for me, way up on the list.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you ended up producing some of the biggest names in country music. And I'm curious because, when you started with Carrie Underwood, she didn't even have an album out. You were basically molding her sound with her. So when you're working with an artist like Carrie, and she's never been heard by the world, and then you're working with somebody like Reba McEntire, who has such an iconic sound, do you have a different approach when you are working with somebody brand new versus, well, I really need to preserve this sound that the world knows and already loves?
As you're sort of saying, to me, it's artist dependent.
Yeah.
With Carrie, it was definitely building a sound with her, and she sort of, as an artist, giving me input about what she liked, the influences she had. So it was sort of my job was to be conduit for her,
right,
to express that musically. And in Reba's case, it was just, frankly, my goodness, it's Reba McEntire. I just want to preserve the greatness, and maybe have a slightly different angle to it.
Have you ever been starstruck sitting behind the console watching an artist? Have you ever had a little bit of nerves over somebody?
I feel like whenever I'm on the other side of the glass, sitting in a console, listening to any great singer, I like the two that are currently sitting downstairs, I still sit there in absolute wonderment, like, my goodness, how do they sound that good? How is that even possible?
Yeah.
So, and I would say my fanboy type of people are maybe not as much artists as it is people that were engineered something, or a songwriter. I'm really, songwriters I remain in absolute awe of.
we've been talking about some of the country music artists, but you've worked with some people far outside of country music, Sting, Steven Tyler, Peter Cetera. Talk about working with artists that are not in the country music world that you kind of came up in.
Well, first of all, I have to admit that when I moved to Nashville, I wanted to be in Christian music. I was a huge Amy Grant fan, so I thought, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And really, outside of George Jones and Tammy Wynette, didn't know much about country music. Wasn't terribly interested in it, if I'm being honest. But, you stay in this town and you start figuring out that, man, there is a psychology and a science behind country music that I just didn't know existed. And I slowly, it started engulfing me,
Yeah.
and it got under my skin. And, frankly, from that time I fell in love with the history of country music, where it came from and where it was in the 80s to even where it is now. It is, the songwriting is the basis of all that.
Yeah.
And I don't think songwriting exists anywhere at the level that it does in Nashville.
Yeah. I have to ask you about Sunday Night Football, because you produced that song that is so iconic that people sit in front of their television sets and watch, millions and millions and millions of people. What is it like to get an opportunity like that?
Well, it's fun.
Yeah.
And it's great to be around, important TV executives, and for even the artist, in that case, that was Carrie, meeting Fred Gaudelli and who was at the time head of NBC Sports, all of it, and Fred and his crew, being so affable and nice and not acting like I'm the big shot. No, it was a collaboration, and I've always loved NFL,
Yeah.
and so it was hard while we were working on that song not to talk about, well, who's going to make it to the Super Bowl this year,
Right.
Fred? What are your thoughts? What are you thinking?
Yeah.
So it was just a huge amount of fun, intimidating also, but working with any of these big artists, it's sort of like, you get up in the morning and say, I just need to put the uniform on and get there and go and be as big a help as I can possibly be.
Yeah. It's still a challenge even after all this time, because everything is, I imagine you treat everything like a brand new.
I do. I'm still so fascinated with artists, and in my life and where I am in life. I started with developing artists, and in my 20s, and I'm back in that developing artist and being around artists, and it is like an elixir. I just love everything about it. I love working with young people, even though sometimes they think, oh, it's a stupid old man. He has stupid ideas, but he can do music, kind of feeling. And I love that. Where the whole middle part of my career was working with mostly people that were already established or, about to be established. You had that feeling because they had the record label behind them, and there were good songwriters helping those artists write those songs, and it was a little more keyed in your favor for something to win.
Yeah.
Although not all of them won.
Yeah. Many of them did, though.
Yeah.
I want to get to some of the incredible artists that you're working with today, but before we touch on that, a couple years ago you had some health issues. And I know that music was such a healer for you during that time. So if you're comfortable talking a little bit about what you went through, and sharing that with everyone. I know you were seemingly doing A-okay, and then you were not.
Right. I felt on that day, felt great that day. In fact, it was some sort of holiday, and my wife and my daughter and I decided, hey, let's go drive somewhere and see something fun. So we decided to drive to the old Brushy Mountain Prison in East Tennessee, which is now a museum, sort of a in-place museum. And so we hopped in the car, stopped by Crystal Burger that no longer exists in Sparta, and crammed ourselves with Crystal Burgers, and we drove out to the prison. We were walking around, and it was so neat to see it, and tragic and wonderful, and all of those emotions. I remember inside one of the prison cells, one of the prison wings, we were walking up the steps, and as I was walking up the steps, I just started sweating, profusely sweating, and I felt like, this is something like I pulled a muscle in my shoulder, but walking up these steps, how ridiculous. How does a person do that? I'm just walking up, and it turns out, this next thing I know, I'm, Jennifer, my wife, and Emily got me back out of the building and laying down on a park bench that was in the main prison yard. And I think at that point we felt like, okay, this is probably a heart thing. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have any reception because there's no phone reception. So they just got me in the car and started driving until Jennifer and Emily could get phone reception, and she dialed 911. And there was an ambulance and police that met us at a parking lot in Oliver Springs, Tennessee.
Wow.
And it was a full-on heart attack. And when I got in the ambulance, I remember the guy saying to me, listen, you have got to stay awake, because if you don't stay awake, you're not going to make it to the hospital.
Oh my goodness.
And I coded in the moment I got to the emergency room, and had one of those sort of classic near-death experiences where you kind of go into another realm. And it was, I remember, I'll be quick about this, but the first thing I saw was this room full of cymbals and drums that were broken and maybe a slightly misshapen, and old guitars. And I was looking at this room, and I was looking sort of above it. Mm. And then I noticed a light out of the corner of my eye that was just a warm and soothing thing. And I felt, man, I should go to that. I want to see what that is. So I turned my attention to the light, and I was getting closer and closer to this light thing. It was like I was going through some sort of tunnel. Yeah. All of a sudden. And then I felt like, yes, I love whatever that is. And right as I was getting right up on it, my wife's face, Jennifer's looking at me, and she's smiling. And I went, I'd rather have that.
Oh my goodness.
I want that face. And then I woke up.
Wow. What an incredible story. You had some angels around you that day.
Yes, no doubt.
For sure.
And had a 100% blockage in the right ascending artery, I believe. So it would have killed me. It was definitely, and Dr. Sheth there in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, saved my life. And brilliant surgeon, brilliant human being. We're sort of friends to this day, and but it really kind of woke me up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because I feel like when you're going through something like that, we either have a tendency to look back and be reflective on all the things we've accomplished in our lives, or to maybe look forward and say, but I have so much left that I want to accomplish. So where were you? Did you have any of those thoughts when you were going through that?
I had a lot of thoughts. There were things that I thought about, and things that I should have been thinking about that I didn't. One of the main things I thought about is, well, God saved me from this, so what does that mean? And, talking to Jennifer back and forth, she helped me understand really, well, maybe you're supposed to make some more music. I've been fortunate to have gone all around the world making music. And there's this idea that, well, what's wrong with that? There's other things that I could have done, maybe should have done, but this is the one thing I know. So I definitely need to get back up, get on my feet, because that's the thing that's going to sustain me outside of the love of my family, is making more music.
Right. And I had a lovely conversation with your wife prior to this interview, and she was talking about how music really was the thing that she believes helped get you through all of those difficult times. The reason I find that so interesting is sometimes I feel like when we work in the music industry and we're, bombarded with this kind of work thing that we have to do all the time, it's not always the first thing people go to when they have a dark time or, they need a break from it. But you didn't do that. You turned back to the thing that you loved from such an early age. And that is what she believes really got you through.
I think that's absolutely the case. I think recovering from the heart attack, you become really, if you've been through it, the heart muscle is weak from that. It's just weak.
Right.
And so you have to build that back. And, I'm not the most healthy person in the world. I like to eat whenever I like to eat. And so that's not a great combination for the heart. But it was a real struggle of getting the strength back. But the thing that really got me over the hump was just putting my hands back on a guitar, building the muscle memory back, building, and just hearing the notes that I've played over and over again my whole life. It just is an amazing feeling.
Yeah. Were you listening to music at that time? Like, do you have favorite artists that you listen to?
I have favorite artists in life. And, there's specific songs that probably nobody else listens to that I listen to. But I can remember shortly after, maybe 2 weeks into the recovery, I was going back to my old catalog of favorite songs, and I came across this band called the Blue Nile. That I bought this album, Hats, when it first came out, and the song's called The City Lights. Mm-hmm. And there's just something that song does to me in my soul that just gives it hope.
Wow. That's so beautiful.
So, in other words, I'm proud of all the recordings I've gotten to work with artists on, but I generally don't listen to my old music. I mean, I want to listen to things that have inspired me, that were something I wasn't involved in, or new things, new artists.
Yeah, that continue to inspire.
Yeah, and the things that continue to inspire me is this type of country music or folky music that's not played on country radio as much, but people are dying to hear it, and these artists are filling stations, and I guess radio has to come along behind that and fill those gaps and figure out. We've had that with a number of artists here recently, and I love that radio seems to be coming around with a lot of these artists, and so that's a great feeling.
Well, your career could have gone another way back in 2022, but it didn't. Right. And you have been just so busy, I feel like, ever since you came out of that. You're working with so many new artists. So talk a little bit about what you are excited to be working on right now and what is still left on your bucket list.
Well, first I have to tell you that when Jennifer and I got married, she shortly after, I had a production coordinator, sort of a chief executive person that was doing all the day-to-day stuff, lovely human being named Kirsten Wines, who decided that she came to me and said, you know what, I've got young kids now, I want to raise them. Mm-hmm. And I can't do both of these. You take up too much time. Your stuff takes up way too much time. I love you, but I'm out of here. And Jennifer came in and said, I'll do that. I'll take that on. I will, and I will. She's always loved music. She loves me, so she dove in with both feet, and the net result of that is she runs all the businesses. I make the music, she runs the businesses, and I couldn't be happier with that.
Well, what a winning combination.
Yes.
And I know that you still have so much more music inside of you to make.
Yes.
I know there are a couple artists sitting right downstairs
Yes.
that you're excited to be working with.
And what I was going to get to was years ago, an attorney introduced me to a young singer named Sierra Black, and she came in town. I met her, and I listened to her sing, and different things strike you about different singers, but the vibrato, even at that young age, she has the timbre of it, the way she sounds, it just immediately took over all my memory banks. And it's like, I'm going to remember that sound. And to this day, I can hear it in my head. The way her voice, when it's hitting a certain group of notes, it just sends me to a different planet. It's so good. It's just beautiful. And so we worked on and off, and she had some babies, went through some life events herself, and called Jennifer and said, I want to get back in. I want to go. And so that's what we're doing. And we're working on new music. We've made some music, and we are. She's doing really well. She's really doing well. She's. I don't want to give away all the stuff, but she's authentic. She's from Las Vegas, born and bred, and has the soul of the sweetest human being you've ever known. She just has that quality. Well,
I think working with you as well will be another winning combination.
Well, she has to put up with that part of it, but I think that we're doing just fine, and we're excited. We were recording in this house yesterday, and it's I'm reminded over and over again, just that voice is just like wow, and she's attractive too, but her voice is really stunning.
Yeah.
And then the other artists we're working with, I remember Jennifer has some other friends in the music industry that I don't know as well. And she heard this artist from a friend of hers and brought it home. And she's always coming home at night. We're sitting in our chairs, and she's playing music, and I'm kind of not paying attention, which I should be, but I'm not. She plays this song, and this singer. It stopped me dead in my tracks. And I turned around and said, "Who's that?" It said his name is Michael Moose Miller. I said, "Well, what's a Michael Moose Miller?" And she, told me what she knew about him. And that voice, it's like this young guy that's got a voice of a 50-year-old. It just is like putting on your favorite warm jacket. That's what incredible. It feels like to me. And he's a lovely kid, and he came to Nashville on a basketball scholarship. I don't want to give all the way, but we just made the decision pretty quickly. We ought to work with that guy. We ought to, and so we met him, and off to the races we've been, and it's just going great guns with him.
Are you continuing to write music?
Almost every day of my life.
Really?
I write with both Sierra and Moose.
Wow.
And write with others too, but that's because, that idea in the prime of my career, I was working 7 days a week, and 6 of those days I was working 14, 16-hour days, and it'll beat you up after a while. I don't care how much you love something, that will beat you up.
Yeah.
And so I'm not doing that anymore. And and the other thing I have to say is like, the person that I work with, my business partner, is also my wife, my best friend, my lover. She's all of that. And people would say, well, how do you even do that? Man, I don't know. I guess God sent me to the right person because it's easy.
Wow.
And in fact, I do not prefer at all not being in her presence. I just feel like I'm going to be more me if she's in the building.
What a lucky man you are. Blessed for sure.
It's the truth, yeah.
What are you most grateful for, both personally and professionally, looking back?
You know, all the music. I feel the most blessed to have been lucky enough to work with all the artists I worked with. Because let me tell you, to work with, you know, Rascal Flatts and sort of being involved with that from the get-go. Carrie, Reba, Bryan is still one of my dearest friends. I met him before he ever had a record deal. I could go on, but that good fortune of being able to say, yeah, let's work together, and what comes out of their heart, what comes out of their mouth as they sing, is like the best in the world. And to be able to constantly be around that is it's almost unexplainable. So I feel very blessed about that. I feel even more blessed to have the people that are in my life today, because I wake up just feeling happy and that, okay, I'm fulfilling what God wanted me to do after the heart attack. This is exactly it.
And there's a lot left to do.
Yeah,
so what are you most excited about looking forward?
Again, I think that's going to be Sierra Black and Moose Miller. Just continuing on to see what the future holds for them. And I think it's going to be pretty.
I think that you have a very bright future ahead of you. What an honor to sit next to you and have the opportunity to talk to you. I mean, your music was the tapestry of my growing up for sure.
I love hearing that. Thank you.
Thank you for everything you've done for this industry and continue to do. And I look forward to hearing all of the new music you are going to put out into the world.
Oh, it's amazing.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much.